I'm relatively new to flying drones. I live in a populated area without many places to fly safely, so I drive great distances to find suitable places to fly. One of my favorites is a large, wide, very flat valley. There's very little traffic on the road I use. The valley is so flat you can fly your drone at just 5 feet above the ground. There's no fear of hitting a fence or high weeds. There are telephone poles on one side of the road, but wide open space on the other, and it's easy to keep the drone in sight. I fly a DJI Mavic Air drone. It has several so-called active tracking modes that are easy to test on this treeless environment. The drone uses onboard optical sensors to track the object, then flies itself to keep the object in the frame. The speed of the tracked object is limited to the highest speed the drone can fly. In my case, that's 15 miles an hour. At the extreme side of this wide valley are some interesting hills. It's a good place to practice flying sideways in a panning-like view. From this wide, flat valley, I drive north on back roads and into the southeast part of Monterey County. The elevation is slightly higher as I drive north, and there are more farms. It's a beautiful area. Next to the farms are some barren hills. Flying up into hills is a challenge. You don't have binocular vision, and there's a slight delay between the time the picture is transmitted and the time you see it on your monitor. So it's hard to judge when and how much to climb as you approach the hill. Fortunately, the Mavic Air has an altitude sensor, and it lets me know when it's too close to the ground, and I can make the necessary correction. Below these hills, as I said before, are farms. I'm sure they offer some nice flying with appropriate permission. However, right on the public road was a challenge, an old-style railroad-like bridge or trestle. Could I fly my drone down through it? As I said, I'm pretty new to this and wasn't sure I could pull this off. My drone drifted into the side beams, but the drone's warning system stopped the drone before it hit anything, and I was able to make a correction. Not too great a picture. I tried unsuccessfully to fly through the bridge at full speed 4 or 5 times before I finally got it right. Wow, that was fun. I tried it one last time. Well, the road beckoned, and I drove on north, gaining elevation as I drove. By now, this back road had become a gravel road. A sign posted said it was impassable after a rain. It was a lovely drive, but the road was fairly narrow, and there were lots of blind turns. Nice views. Now, my trip was scheduled slightly after the peak season for wildflower blooming. However, at this elevation, there were still areas in the late phases of their bloom. I like to get low. You'll notice that the wind is blowing. The flowers are waving, and the drone is being blown around a bit. That's one of the bad features of this area. I've never been here when the wind isn't blowing. Look at my hat being blown in the wind. That's pretty strong wind. There was a huge, interesting boulder just off the side of the road. I decided to explore it, despite the high wind. You can see that the drone is being blown around by the strong wind. I wasn't afraid to fly close, as I hoped the avoidance system on the drone would help protect it. When you're out in this kind of wild country, you don't want your drone to go down. You might not be able to retrieve it. Off in the distance, you can see the San Joaquin Valley. I got back in the car and headed back the way I'd come, and admired the views from the car. Lots of great trees and smooth mountains and hills. Speaking of trees, I spent a lot of time practicing flying between objects, which I should be able to do if I was a really good pilot. Here I try flying between two trees. Seems like this should be simple, and so far it isn't simple for me, and I sure don't want to crash my drone down in the wilderness a considerable distance from the road. I don't think I'd ever retrieve it if it went down here. Somehow windmills are a fascinating target for me. I tried to film 2 windmills on this trip. This one was even spinning. The second windmill was located beside a very interesting gnarled tree. I went for the gnarled tree first, but I almost hit it. Thanks to the drone's avoidance system, I didn't hit it. Then I tried for video of the windmill. And it was time to head back at the end of the day. I passed some interesting barren hills and flew over them. I've sped up the frame rate here in post in order to speed things up a bit. Finally, just before I got back to the motel for the night, I passed a farm field with deer browsing for food. Now there's a cat in my backyard that isn't afraid of my drone, until the drone gets within about a foot of the cat. Then the cat moves away slowly, not afraid. The drone makes noise so the deer can easily hear the drone approaching. So, how close could I get to the deer? Happy flying!